When in the course of human events,
Welcome, everybody, to Our More Perfect Union. I'm David Vann with Sooner Politics. I'm here to help the founder of Constitutional Grounds, David Oldham, on this new venture of helping to better understand our more perfect union. David, it's good to see you tonight.
Great to see you. Thank you for everything that you're doing, David. I really appreciate it.
Well, this really inspires me, what you're doing. You know, my understanding of the Constitution, I've kind of come up with the analogy of an onion. There's layers to understanding it. And you think you understand it, oh, there's another layer underneath. And, you know, and the biggest part of it is getting rid of our suppositions, you know. And there's so many things that we take for granted, when many of those things 200 years ago were much different than we understand them today.
Well, you're absolutely right. And part of that is not so much that the language has changed at all, but people quite frankly lie about what our law, what our Constitution says.
Yeah.
And they've been doing that for 200 years. So it seems like everything's changed. But
yeah,
we're gonna find out here, it really is very clear when we actually know what it says.
Yeah.
So,
well, what's tonight's episode about tonight, David?
Well, the number one thing that I am being confronted everywhere I go is the election integrity, and what happened back in November through January, and in the choosing of the president of the United States.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about that because the Constitution actually has a lot to say, and we can cover all of it, and you're going to get to see exactly what it says.
Now, this is something you have a little background in. You are a former federal elector for the state of Oklahoma, is that right?
I am. I was the elector for the first congressional district here in Oklahoma back in 2016.
Great. So you've had a little bit of inside baseball picture of how it happens. We used to send those electors to Congress, to DC, but we changed that lately. And the last, 30, 40 years, my understanding is they just go to the state capitol now.
Well, actually, it started, they just went to the state capitol.
Oh.
But, and the idea was that they would meet in the states. Because remember, our president is elected by the states via the people within the states. So through the Electoral College. Right. So everything takes place within the states.
Yes. Yeah. Now, you had told me your experiences at the Oklahoma state capitol, but that day in 2016, I watched through C-SPAN and different news outlets and on the web. So many states did it so differently. And probably the most amazing one to me was the state of Texas. They literally organized like a congressional chamber.
Oh, well, they took over the Senate chambers in Texas for the entire day. They didn't just go there for an hour.
Right.
And, a ceremonial thing. No. They did a whole production of the thing. It took most of the day, and they actually went into session and
elected a speaker, right?
Oh, I'm trying to remember everything that they did, but yes, they did a real production. It's like, wow.
So the lesson we get from that is there's no rubber stamped one way to do everything, as long as you're meeting the principles outlined in the Constitution.
Correct. And that's very, very important that you bring that up, because the states and the state legislatures are the ones who create the rules for their individual elections. Of course, an election has to be fair, and it has to be actually, an honest election. But beyond that, it's the states that decide just how those elections are to be run, and
Okay.
specifically the state legislatures.
Well, and then another important state officer in this is the Secretary of State. And
Correct.
in every state, though, that office of Secretary of State takes a much different form one state to another. In Oklahoma, I was talking to the son of a former Secretary of State in Oklahoma and said, my dad was just a glorified butler for the governor, and because they were a governor's appointee. But in other states, they are seen as very autonomous. They are elected separately. They do not take their orders from the governor in several of these states. In fact, they're kind of the referee in many states. In most states, the Secretary of State has authority over the election process. And in Oklahoma, it's not at all like that.
Well, correct. In no state is the Secretary of State allowed to create their own rules and so forth outside of those which are allowed by the legislature. But whether or not they, no matter how they come about, how their power is derived, whether via the governor or via just the elections, and they're a separate a separate entity within the executive branch. They are responsible for the certification of elections, and as we are now finding out, there's been a whole lot of problems with the way that a lot of these people have done their business, and it's kind of ubiquitous across the United States. We're finding.
Yeah. Well, I understand you have a presentation prepared for us, and I think you're going to put that up on screen. Yeah. I think one of the first points, I don't know how deeply you go into, but you just kind of hinted on it when you said the legislators make the rules. Now, it still goes through the governor's signature, but the point is it is a statutory process in each state.
It is, and you can see on the screen here that Article 1, Section 4 says that the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. This note that it continues and says, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. Now, it then continues, and we go to Article 1. I'm sorry, I went the wrong way.
No, this is Article 1 of our U.S. Constitution, which focuses on Congress generally, both houses of Congress. Right.
And looks like I may have missed it. Well, no, there's got to be there's got to be one here. Article 1. Article 1. There it is.
Okay.
It says in Article 2, Section 1, that each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled.
Yeah. This is key, because if you understand that each article of the Constitution deals with essentially a different part or function of government. So you've been talking Section 1, Congress. Section 2, is that not the executive branch?
Correct. Article 1 and Article 2, the articles are then broken up into sections. Right. And so Article 1 is the legislative branch. So when they are, that deals with how are Congress people, representatives and senators, how are they chosen? It's found in Article 1. Yeah. Article 2, it's how we choose the president. And Article 2, Section 1 says again that it is the legislature that chooses, or that directs. Now, one thing that, let me get back to this, and that is that I want to note that there is no caveat, as with the first one we looked at in Article 1, that Congress can make any change to this.
Yes.
Okay. It says each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct. There's no Congress may change this regulation at some point in the future. Doesn't exist. So when it comes...
Other than the once every 10 years when we do the census and reapportion representation. Right.
Correct. Now that brings up yet another point. So let me work that out. No, because it's a perfect segue.
Yeah.
Let me find it here real quick.
Okay.
I moved some of these things around and I lost where everything was.
Well, good. While you're looking that up, I want to remind people you're watching Our More Perfect Union. This is a production of constitutionalgrounds.com with David Oldham, the founder. I'm David Vann with Sooner Politics, and I'm giving my assistance to this venture. And this is to give us a better understanding of the many layers of understanding of our Constitution. You think you know the Constitution? I'm telling you, you never fully know it.
It's amazing how you just keep learning.
Yes.
So we were talking that the times, places, and manners of holding elections for senators or representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the... Oh, that's still the wrong one. I thought I had the right one. Hang on.
Okay.
I promise you, folks, we will get better at this as we get going.
Right.
Let's do...
Yeah, so may at any time by law make and alter such regulations. So
yeah, that's okay. Well, I don't know where it went, but this gets to the... Oh, here it is, right here. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states. So it says that representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union. And it says according to their respective numbers.
Yes.
So, of course, the respective numbers, we take a recount every 10 years, and that's what you're talking about, the census.
The census, yes.
Now, the manner of choosing, the rules for choosing and holding the elections, that doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the apportionment and the numbers as they are apportioned. Now, this section was amended by the 14th Amendment, and where it now says a little simpler that representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed.
Okay.
And this will lead into another conversation we'll have for another show.
And also, that was amended by the 16th Amendment, the direct taxation. So that part of assessing a tax to each state was how we did things for a good 150 years. And then nearly 140 years.
And yes, the taxation portion is changed by the 16th.
Yeah.
But notice that the 14th Amendment here deals only with representatives. So when the 14th was passed between 1867 or 1865 and 1913, there was still no direct taxation. That remained as per the Article 1, and then we get here into the 14th. Now,
before you go on, I wanted to clarify too, when it says excluding Indians not taxed, in another place, it refers to our rights as citizens in the 14th Amendment, where it adds a clause and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
Correct.
In other words, it wasn't that we were being racist, that because they're Indians, they don't get to do certain things. It's because we had set up treaties with them to grant them full autonomy within the United States, self-government.
Correct.
So, and it's just like the territories, like Puerto Rico. They're U.S., it's a U.S. territory. It's not a state. The people in Puerto Rico would have additional rights and privileges if they were admitted to the states. But one of the benefits they have is they don't pay federal taxes, because
Correct.
what was our argument against King George? Taxation without representation.
Correct.
Was a tyranny. And so
Correct.
we don't do what King George did. We do not tax those whom we don't give representation to. Right?
Correct.
I'm doing well. Good.
And well, no, I don't know what the practice is. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I don't know if we tax Puerto Rico or not.
No.
We sure send them a lot of money for them to not be paying
Yes.
any taxes into the United States. But
they got a good deal,
issue.
folks. And it's not just them. It's Guam. It's Marshall Islands. I mean, U.S.
Correct.
Virgin Islands. So there's so many of them. So again, my point is, it's not because of their race. It's because they have a greater level of autonomy than the rest
Correct.
of us have.
Correct.
All right.
So the concern, after we've seen now that the states get their representation by the number of people within their state via the census, and constitutionally we're to make a count and then determine the basis for their representation. And then we see that the legislatures are to come up with the rules. What we see happened, and was discussion before it ever even happened. The discussion was a little bit strange, but it did get pointed out even before the election. And anybody who has watched Constitutional Grounds or watched 3D Politics or any of the other things that you and I are a part of, David, you know that whenever I was talking for months before the election that there were states that were going to be nullified in their, or should be nullified in their representation, and because they were trying to create rules outside of the legislated allowance, so they were going outside of their purview in creating new rules.
They were doing more than trying. They were actually imposing.
They were actually doing it. It was the judiciary in Pennsylvania. It was the governor, election boards, the state secretaries of state in a number of different places. It was in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, and so forth.
Yeah.
So what we had here was we had a problem in that elections in those states were actually illegal because they were running off of non-legislated rules.
Okay.
So the concern here is that we have a definition in the 14th Amendment of who is a citizen in Section 1. In Section 2, and let me bring it up here so that I can let everybody see it. In Section 2, find it.
Okay.
It says this. It says this. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for president and vice president of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof is denied to any, and we put in quotes, any or brackets, lawful voter of such state, or in any way abridged, except for participation in rebellion or other crime. So if you are going to deny or abridge, except for lawful reasons, because they have been involved in rebellion or crime.
Okay. Now,
Come on. Where's my next slide? It says, oops. It says the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in the proportion which the number of lawful voters shall bear to the whole number of lawful voters in such state. So when you run an illegal election, what you have just done is you have you've denied or abridged the right to vote of every single citizen in the state.
okay.
Okay. And so therefore what happens is with 100% abridged. Now, abridging could be that you're getting propped up, or you can be abridged by being reduced, having your value of your vote reduced.
Help me out. What does propped up mean?
So when you're propping up somebody, it's like you're adding numbers to their tallies, to the numbers of people who actually voted.
Gotcha.
No, it doesn't. I'm not talking fraud here, but I'm talking about where it allows the election to potentially run into an area that would support one side versus the other. Okay. And so in Pennsylvania, they had a cutoff date that you had to have your forms in by. Well, they added 3 more days to that.
Well, in some counties, and particularly in the Philadelphia area, which always wins Pennsylvania for the Democrats, is they have to rely heavily on Philadelphia.
Well, very good portion. But if it props up or supports the in this particular case is what you're saying is the Democratic vote from Philadelphia. Right. But Philadelphia's got a different system than the rest of the state.
Yeah.
You don't have a fair election to the rest of the state.
Yes, and that's where the Zuckerberg Dropbox issue comes in, because he offered to pay, in Georgia anyway, for Dropbox, but they put them way proportionally in the Democrat stronghold areas, and the Republican stronghold areas didn't get that convenience.
Right.
So we gave a convenience to certain targeted demographics that we thought were going to help one side or the other. So that is a form of propping up, right?
Correct. A form of an abridgment of the vote.
Yes.
And so whether it's positive to your viewpoint or it's negative to your viewpoint, it's an abridgment. And so therefore, because it was done to the entire state, then what happens is as we saw at the very beginning, the basis for representation goes down to 0.
Okay.
So now what happens, and we see that back with the 14th Amendment, it said for any of those elections, president, vice president, Congress, senator, state legislatures or the judicial officers thereof, if it's anybody in there, then their representation go down to 0. Congress, let me share this real quick. Find it real fast.
Okay, by the way, folks, you're listening to Our More Perfect Union, a production of Constitutional Grounds with David Oldham. I'm David Vann with Center Politics. We're glad you're joining us tonight. This is a new series we're doing on a better understanding of our U.S. Constitution. Go ahead, David.
So Article 1, Section 5 says, each house shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members. So who is to be the election judge for illegal elections in each state, for Congress, and ultimately the president?
It was Congress, right?
It's Congress.
Yeah.
And so that is why we end up with Congress having to do something come January. So according to the 14th Amendment, what should have happened is Congress should have gathered on the 3rd or the 2nd of January, maybe the day before, or first thing in the morning, and Congress people from around the country who were legitimately elected should have been raising objections to all of the Congress people from all of these states that ran these illegal elections.
Okay, so what we're saying here is just because your Secretary of State in your state or your election board says, Tom, you got elected to Congress, go to Congress, that doesn't mean Congress has to seat you.
No, not at all.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But how do you keep Congress from being a mob?
Well, that is one of the weaknesses of the Constitution. The answer. No, I mean it could be argued it's a weakness. It can also be argued that that is the responsibility of the electorate back in the various congressional districts. So, in other words, we have the duty as informed citizens to make sure our Congress people are abiding by the Constitution and the things that we're talking about right here.
Is there not such an officer, I believe the term, the clerk of the House?
Yes, there is.
Okay. My understanding is until you seat everybody and have an election for who's going to be the new speaker, the old speaker doesn't get to keep the gavel. That there is a parliamentary, officer of the body, a more enduring officer, a clerk of the House, or at least I see that in several legislative bodies.
Well, they may have it, but the thing is that the clerk is not an elected official.
I know this is a tricky thing.
It is a very tricky thing, but the thing is that it can be that everybody gets sworn in, but further in Article 1, in the very next section, in the very next clause after the one that I've just mentioned in Section 5, it says that by 2/3 of vote of Congress, of each house of Congress, they can remove a member. So even if you get an illegally elected person to come in and come into Congress, you have the new Congress sworn in, and the House has to be sworn in order to then conduct business.
Okay.
They would then have to kick out the illegally elected member, and they would have to do that by 2/3 vote.
I think it's more important not to seat them in the first place.
Well, it would be. I mean, that could be an argument. The thing is that I don't know how you would actually accomplish that by law, because you don't have. As soon as the old House goes away, you have a new House, and the new House is what judges, and you don't have that until everybody is seated, unless you.
Yeah. It's a little cleaner when there's a special election to fill a vacancy. Exactly. And you have order in there, but
well, and the cleanness in 2021 was on January 5th. There was an election in Georgia, and there were 2 Democrats elected. They ran under the same identical rules as the November election for president, which were illegal. Yeah. And but yet allowed to transpire. And so they did the same thing for these senators. Well, you already have the Senate seated back on the 3rd of January. Well, what should have happened is the first order of business on January 6th, before the electors for the electoral vote was counted, you needed to reject those senators from Georgia, and I believe that there is statute and or Senate rules that would allow for that to take place. Because again, it's not like
they were not even officially recognized even in Georgia until Friday. That's when they certified the election.
Well, they should. They would have. Whenever they got there to Congress,
right?
They were. It's required that they would be kicked back to their states. Yeah, and the state would have to run a proper election before anybody from that state can be allowed to actually be seated.
Okay, we're going to have to continue this in another episode. I don't know how much time we have left on this one. Should we take a break here, or we got some time?
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I don't have a timer on this.
I think this might be a good time to break
Let's
and
go
reset.
ahead and do that, because I think we've pretty well covered it. The real thing for people to remember is the state legislatures create the rules for the elections. For president, Congress has no say. There's a bill in Congress right now where they're trying to cram election rules and commissions at the federal level onto all states.
Yeah.
Going to federalize all elections. They cannot do that legally for the president. Cannot do it.
Right.
But they are going to try.
Well, they can't do it constitutionally.
Well, that's legally, because the Constitution still is the supreme law.
They like to conflate whatever they do as being the law.
Right, exactly, they do. Well, there is that, and then so the states create the rules. If the rules are not followed, everybody's right to vote is abridged. Therefore, the Congress people and the presidential electors have no right to be accepted or seated. Yeah. And so, and must be kicked back to the states. And that is the punishment on the states. You don't get representation in Congress unless you conduct fair and honest elections and by the rules. And if you don't do that, then we're going to keep kicking you back, because you're abridging the right to vote of your citizens.
Well, I've got about 8 or 9 questions of what does this mean, but we don't have time for that. Why don't we bring that up in our next episode?
Sounds good. Let's do it soon.
Well, I tell you what, folks, you've been watching the inaugural broadcast of Our More Perfect Union with David Oldham of Constitutional Grounds. I'm David Vann with SoonerPolitics.org, and we're glad you're part of us. Join us every week about this same time. We're going to be debuting our podcast series, and send this to some of your friends, if you would, and ask them to join in, get a better understanding. We don't talk about news. We don't cover OU sports. We don't cover the weather. We cover the Constitution, and we want you to be a part of it. David, any last thoughts?
Hey, thank you for being here, folks. Thank you, David, for all you're doing. And I look forward to seeing you each week and talking about another interesting point that affects us every single day, straight from the Constitution.
All right. Have a good night.
Good night.